Welcome to the I Love Coaching podcast, the show where we help coaches, entrepreneurs, and leaders build businesses that create massive impact. I'm Adam Roach, alongside my incredible co-host,
Jess Weber, and we're here today to bring you the best strategies, mindset shifts, and real-life success stories to help you level up in your coaching journey.
Whether you're launching your coaching business, scaling to 6 or 7 figures, or just looking for inspiration to push through, this podcast is your go-to resource.
We're bringing you expert insights, real talk, and actionable items every single episode. So if you're ready to take your coaching game to the next level,
then let's dive on in. Welcome back, everybody. Welcome back to the I Love Coaching podcast. I'm your host, Adam Roach. You know me. Though today we have, I'm going to share with you who we have on this podcast, and this is you're going to want to sit down, shut up, and listen to what this man has to say, specifically in the coaching space, in the sports space, and also in the space of just full-on development. I have today joining us is Drew Hanlen, renowned NBA skills coach, CEO of Pure Sweat Basketball, the mastermind behind the development of stars like Joel Embiid, Jason Tatum, Bradley Beal, a former standout at Belmont University. Now, if my memory serves me right, he probably still has the highest three-point percentage shooting. Is that correct? Maybe. We'll see. We'll find out here in a minute. And the author of Stop Bullshitting Yourself. We're going to talk about that book. Drew is one of the most sought after trainers in the game. And Drew, welcome to the I Love Coaching podcast.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. I'm excited to join you and to share as much as we can with your community.
Yeah, this is going to be great. So now, as a native Hoosier, basketball is like our middle name. I knew you, St. Louis boy, right?
Yep. Yeah, no, I did. I mean, basketball to me too it's really cool because I feel like the game of basketball just connects so many individuals. You know what I mean? Regardless if you're a fan, if you're a player, a coach. I mean, there's so many different avenues. But I always say that the two things that really connect people, are a ball and a smile. A ball and a smile. And I really do think that, I've been all over the world, different countries, sometimes, getting clinics and presentations translated on stage. And I'm like, the ball connects individuals and a smile connects individuals despite, the difference of backgrounds, the difference of languages, the difference of cultures. So I think that's something that we definitely share.
That's super cool. Yeah, for sure. So we start usually the majority of these podcasts when we have guests and we say, Drew, you were born and then what happened? So fill the blank there as far back or as early as you want to. And then we'll dive into some really acute questions here.
Yeah, I was born as a 5'11" white American, which is not necessarily the cards you want to be dealt if you are a basketball enthusiast like I was. I was somebody that grew up idolizing Michael Jordan, being from the Midwest, was born in 89. So literally my early years were just Michael Jordan. As my birthday present, I used to get one ticket to an NBA game. And my Christmas present was a flight to that game because obviously St. Louis did not have an NBA team. So that's what I loved, and whenever I got in trouble, I used to not be able to watch Michael Jordan on TV. And I remember sneaking my dad's Walkman radio into, my room so I could listen to the game. And, that's the basketball side of me. And then the other side of me was I was somebody that we grew up and, my dad ran a company, but we didn't make much money. The company would break even. So, I lived off of $45,000 a year. My mom was a stay-at-home mom. But the one thing that they poured into us was if you want something, you can work for it and get it. And so I was a kid doing lemonade stands. I was a kid cutting grass. I was a kid shoveling snow. Believe it or not, when I was, I think 11 years old, my dad said this because I didn't know obviously how far back it was. When I was 11, I saved up enough to get a snow plow, where you could push it and it would shoot out the snow so I could do driveways faster. But that's just who I was. I was always a hustler at heart. And I paralleled all that hustle into the sport I loved, basketball, which led me to be player of the year in Missouri, won a state championship, left my high school as all-time winningest player, got college scholarships, went to Belmont, left Belmont, all-time winningest player in Belmont history, played in 2 NCAA tournaments. And like you said, I'm still to this day 17th all-time in NCAA three-point percentage for a season. And so did some really cool things as a player and then transitioned that into coaching some of the world's best basketball players, which is what I do today.
So stinking good. we have parallel upbringings, if you will. Indiana boy, farmer, my grandparents, dad was a coach himself, an Olympic swim coach. I had an uncle, maybe he's a great uncle, who was an Indiana Mr. Basketball. So literally we would shoot hoops before we went to school. And it was always, if we make this free throw, we're going to have a good day. If we miss this free throw, it's going to be a shitty day. And so we would sit there and say that first one didn't count. The second one, that counts. Okay, let's get going. That's really cool.
No, and it is. I mean, it's crazy how I don't think people realize how much, like, the saying, how you do something is how you do everything. It really does translate in so many different worlds. For me as a basketball player, I knew I was undersized. I knew I was an average athlete, but I wanted to be a college basketball player. Since we didn't have, a college fund sitting for me, my parents basically said, you got to get an academic scholarship or an athletic scholarship or take out a loan. Those are my three choices. And, so I poured into myself as a basketball player. I gave up sweets at 12 years old, did not eat sweets until I was done playing college basketball at 22. So think about that. Like at 12 years old, no soda, no cake, no ice cream, no sugar. And I did it for a month and said, you know what? If I can do it for a month, I can do it for a year. If I can do it for a year, I can do it for my career. And, I didn't know if that was necessarily improving my athleticism or improving my body or making me a better basketball player. But I was like, you know what? I know the alternative could hurt me, so why not? Why not? And then, as far as you said, shooting before school, I used to wake up at 4:59 a.m., 1 minute before everyone that thought they were waking up early at 5 a.m., get to the gym, meet my high school principal at 5:15, shoot 1,000 shots every single morning. But the compound of that was, throughout my 4 years, if you do the math, that's 1.4 million shots that I shot while all my competitors were sleeping in. One of the things I used to love, it was like my favorite part of every morning was I would wake up and I'd go to the gym and, I'd shoot my shots. And then right when I was finishing up my workout, you'd start to see some of your teammates and you'd start to see some of your classmates walking in and they're still tired, they're still rubbing their eyes. And I'm like, man, I just accomplished more before they woke up than they will the whole day. And I just think that, too many people have the mentality of, I was dealt a bad hand, so I should complain about the hand I was dealt instead of saying, you know what? Every hand has a chance to be a winning hand if you play it correctly. And, instead of trying to complain or make justifiable excuses, there's plenty of justifiable excuses. I'm not 6 foot. I'm not super athletic. I just said, hey, what am I? I am a worker. I am a relentless worker. I'm dedicated more than everyone else. I'm tougher than everyone else. I'm going to use my strengths instead of complaining about my weaknesses. And so I think that's something that people should take in consideration is, a lot of times we look at why we can't instead of really trying to build evidence of why we can.
That's so stinking true. So stinking true. And I love the visual there of, because think about, we'll go back to food real quick for sweets as an example. Sweets become such a reward for young kids, right? Good job, Johnny. Let's go get an ice cream cone. Good job, Johnny. Here's a Snickers bar, right? And you had the commitment at an early age to say, okay, I don't know what that's doing to my body, but I know it probably can't be good. So I'm going to say no to that. And then look at the commitment that it brought to go shoot that many shots before your other boys were even out of bed.
Yeah. And I think the other thing is, it's one of those things where I'm a big believer 100% is easier than 90%. And when I say that, a lot of people don't understand it. So I want to paint a bigger picture. I've never drank alcohol. I'm 35 years old. I turned down $10,000 for one shot of alcohol. One of my clients was trying to tempt me. He was like, I can buy this from him. And I said no. And people looked at me like I was crazy. And I said, you guys don't understand. It's not that one shot would kill me. But as soon as you break a promise to yourself, as soon as you break a commitment to yourself, it gives yourself an out. It gives yourself proof that he doesn't follow through when there isn't an easier way out. For me, I was all about 100%. I was like, I don't eat sweets. So then every single time somebody said, do you want ice cream? No. It wasn't like is this the one time I eat sweets? If I have one bite, does that mean I might as well just enjoy the whole ice cream cone? It wasn't one time, oh, it's your birthday, let's give you a hall pass. I think too many people, what they do is they set these commitments, but then anytime that it gets tough or anytime that the alternative seems like a better idea, they give themselves an out. They give themselves a break. And so that's the 90%. There's a lot of people that have diets where they're like, all right, I'm all in. I'm going to do dry January, or I'm going to, I'm not going to eat any fast food, or I'm not going to whatever it is. And then their friends offer them a drink and they're like, you know what? One shot won't kill me. One drink won't kill me. And then they break the promise to themselves. And then what happens is they say, all right, I already broke my streak. I might as well enjoy tonight. They wake up hungover the next day and they feel like shit, and they stop trusting themselves because they've realized over and over again they've given up on the commitments and promises they've set for themselves. Same thing with diets. People always, do some diet starts Monday. It's like, it's not going to start Monday. And if it does start Monday, by Friday, your friends are going to invite you out to a dinner and you're going to break it. And then you're going to try to start over again. So it's like, instead of stopping and starting and restarting, I just was like, let's give momentum. Let's build momentum. Let's keep these promises. Let's keep firm commitments 100%, not 90%, so that I can really go all in. And then I'm going to live with the results that come from those things.
Yeah, that is so good. Yeah, I was taught many years ago a definition of commitment. Commitment is doing the thing you said you would do long after the original mood you set it in has left you. And that's exactly what I'm hearing right there. Let me ask you this, and for our listeners here, I can hear them thinking right now, well, I'm not Drew Hanlen. I'm not 100%. Sometimes I'm 90%. He had to have some accountability around him. He had to have some people holding his feet to the fire. What would you say about accountability here? Did you have accountability, or was this just totally internal and you were just pushing yourself to the 100%?
It was definitely internal. It was something that was driving me that I just wanted. I wanted to be a college basketball player. I wanted to be an NBA player. I fell short of that goal, but I didn't want to get to the end of my career and have the same regrets that so many other players have. You see it every year. High school athletes, they lose their game in the playoffs and they start bawling their eyes out. And me being a very hard, reality checker, I'm like, if you didn't do anything and everything you possibly could to put yourself in the best situation to give yourself a chance to win, I don't feel sorry for you. I don't feel sorry. Now, the person that poured their heart and soul into it, that was waking up before school, that was lifting weights when they didn't feel like it, that was practicing hard and not, taking the shortcuts, not cheating drills when coaches weren't watching, the guy that was doing film, the guy that was going to sleep early and skipping parties so that he could have energy for that early morning practice next day. That guy that loses, I feel for him, because I'm like, man, you're somebody that actually is pouring all the way into it. So I think that's, to me, what it's all about. It's about finding something that motivates you enough to really go all in with action. And I'll give something to you, because you just said something. Well, I'm not Drew Hanlen. And you know what I would say? I would say, yes. Let me give you a better example. My dad. So my dad was somebody that, he was somebody that, he was overweight. And when he was overweight, he had no reason to get a six-pack. He was like, Drew, I'm happily married. I have kids. I have grandkids. I don't need a six-pack. And I said, okay, Pops. I said, but we want you to be healthy. He didn't care. That still didn't drive any motivation to do the thing. And I remember us going to Super Bowl one year, and, Gatorade was who brought me there. And they gave us these jackets, and his jacket, a 2XL jacket, would not zip up. He's 6 foot. He was 310 pounds or something like that. And I remember getting off the plane after the Super Bowl. We had a great time. That was when Tom Brady marched back from, the big deficit and came back and won in overtime. And we got in the driveway, and I said, Pops, we need to talk. I said, listen, your dad, my grandpa, the reason that he's not here with us today is because he did not change his actions. He didn't take his health serious enough. When he had pains in his hand, he was a butcher, so his hand would, start shaking. He would take a shot of Jameson and then another shot of Jameson because he wanted to drink himself to sleep so he didn't have to feel that pain. That was the only way he could get himself to sleep at night. I said he didn't start eating well. My dad and my grandpa, they used to have a saying, nobody can trust a skinny butcher. They're like, you want your butcher to have a big belly because they're eating well and stuff like that. And I said, these are all justifiable excuses, but they're all excuses. And I said, your mom right now has not had her soulmate for 10 years, a decade. Your mom has to wake up every morning by herself because your dad's decisions of not taking care of his health. You have to go to his gravesite every single Father's Day, every single birthday, and celebrate with his gravestone instead of him because he didn't change his health. Do you realize my mom, your wife, and us, we're going to have to live with those same pains that your mom and you have to live with if you don't make a change? And you know what? The next day, he finally walked around the block the first time. And I remember him asking, there were so many excuses. Well, what's my workout plan? Well, and I said, just walk. I don't care if you get up and walk down the street and come back. Just walk. And if you feel good, walk around the block. If you feel great, walk around the neighborhood, but just walk. 90 pounds later in a calendar year, he was the most proud he's ever been of himself. And he said, guess what, Drew? I'm going to be able to get to really know your grandkids, my grandkids. I'm really going to get to, be able to be there for them. I'm going to be their coach. So that's what I would say. You don't have to be a maniac like me. I get that I'm wired different, but you have to have something inside you that says, you know what? Enough is enough. And then find a bigger reason, a bigger purpose to drive that action so that you finally follow through with the things that you've been saying you're going to do for so long.
Right. That's so good. Nice job, son. That's a hell of a story there. And you and I both know this from the coaching space. When the pain is great enough, people will take action. Right.
If pain's not, they don't take action. Like the worst thing is when somebody is like, my life is meh. And it's like, well, it's not like rock bottom where you have to change. It's not like your back's against the wall where the only way is forward. It's like, it's good enough. But the problem is that good enough eats at you. I'm a big believer that like everything, I think all stresses, all struggles, all insecurities are because there's a gap that you allow to exist in your life. And so that could mean your weight. It could be my dad was 310 pounds and he needed to be 220 pounds. There's a 90-pound gap. That could be an athlete that says, I want college scholarships. I have to average 20 points to get college scholarships. I'm averaging 12 points. That's an 8-point gap. It could be somebody financially that's living paycheck to paycheck where it's like, man, if I could just make an extra $20,000 a year, then I would be financially comfortable. I wouldn't have to worry if I'm going to be able to pay my bills each month. There's a $20,000 gap. So it's those little gaps that don't cause enough pain to make us change that end up really dragging our life down.
So good. That is so true and so good. Speaking of gaps, let's go back to your story now. So incredible high school athlete, incredible college athlete, 5'11", not really the NBA size, and you fell a little short. Not too far because you had an incredible, we'll call it amateur career, right? So we're not in the NBA, though now you are one of the most prolific trainers and coaches for NBA players. Walk us through that transition. Walk us through leaving Bellop and with all the glory that you had of being that incredible basketball player in college to now being one of the best trainers and coaches in the NBA.
Yeah, this is going to shock you, but I mean, it actually started my junior year in high school. That's when I started my company. So what happened was I wanted to make money because I had a car that would not start if it was snowing, if it was cold outside, if it rained the night before, it wouldn't start. My dad literally traded $300 in a box of steaks for my first car. It had 200,000 miles on it. It had a big dent in the driver's side door. It was incredible. And so I was like, I can't be the player of the year, in the state and think I'm all cool driving with a car that needed to be jump start every other day.
Right.
And so I was like, I got to make money. And so I found out that referees made $18 an hour. And so I was like, I want to be a referee. And so I applied to be a referee. And the guy that was doing the application process said, you don't have any credentials. You don't have any certifications. I said, I promise you I can do a better job than the refs that blow calls during my games. And they're like, that's great, but you have to have credentials. He said, Drew, listen, my son loves watching you play basketball. He looks forward to watching you play. Why don't you coach him? And I kind of paused and he was like, I'll give you $18 an hour. And I was like, perfect. And so I retired from being a ref before I ever refed a game. And I changed my career to coaching. But when I was coaching, one of the perks was, that I got to use the gym that I was coaching out of. And I was on court 3 and there was 2 games going on one day. And I was working my butt off like I always did. And I had a parent from court 2 come over and say, I've never seen somebody work that hard. Can I pay you $20 to work on my son and put him through that exact same workout with that exact same intensity, exact same pace? And I was like, that's a $2 pay raise. I'm no longer coaching. Now I'm a trainer. And I started training. Matt Baker was his name. And then I started training a lot of other local players. I got to the point where I had 96 kids in these academies that I was training. I was charging them $200 a month, bringing in $18,000 a month. Then I wrote a book my junior year in high school. I started selling it out of the back of my trunk, sold 5,000 copies that summer. And one of the players that I had trained was Bradley Beal. And Brad went from 8 points a game as a freshman to 25 points a game as a sophomore. And everyone was like, what did you do? He had a 50-point game, his second game of his sophomore season. And everyone's like, what did you do this summer? And he was like, I trained with Drew. And he had a great foundation with his mom that she had taught him how to shoot from an early age. He had lifted weights with his brothers to get stronger that year. He had grown a couple inches, but I was the new dynamic. And so he was the first guy that I started really pouring into. And then when I was a sophomore in college, I started working out David Lee, who was my first NBA player. And a cool story about that was I remember we're having, before my senior year, so junior going into senior year at college, we're having dinner with Steph Curry. And Steph had just signed his 4-year, $44 million deal, which he was really excited about at the time because he had ankle problems early in his career. And he took us out to Cheesecake Factory. And Dave's like, hey, are you going to go watch Drew's opening game? He plays against your brother. Seth Curry played at Duke, and that's who we opened up my senior season against. And he was like, oh, I didn't know you coached college basketball. And David was like, no, he plays. And I remember Steph being like, wait, time out. You're in college? And I was like, yeah. He's like, David, why are you listening to a mid-major college basketball player? And David said something that was so profound, and it really gave me a lot of confidence. He said, listen, Drew is not better at basketball than I am, but Drew can make me the best version of myself, a better version of me. Phil Jackson was not better than Michael Jordan or Kobe Bryant or Shaquille O'Neal, but he made them better. And so once I heard that, I was like, wow, I don't have to be a better basketball player to pour into these guys. I just have to be able to find solutions to help them become better versions of themselves. And that is the journey that I've been on for this last, 15 years of just pouring into players, doing all the dirty work, watching hours and hours and hours of film, digging into analytics, constantly picking high IQ people's brains to find solutions for problems. And, now I've been able to transition that into businessmen and entrepreneurs and just everyday people, which is the next step. But it's all the same strategies. It's finding the gaps that exist, putting together a blueprint, finding something that's going to drive action, some compelling reason inside that's going to drive action, constantly refining, your process as you go so that you get more efficient over time and more effective over time. And then obviously get the results and keep getting better results. And so, that's honestly why I wrote the book, was because I have this system that has worked for my dad to lose 90 pounds. It worked for me to get to where I'm at. It's worked for, MVPs and all-stars at the NBA level. And I'm like, there's no reason why I shouldn't start sharing this strategy with everyone.
That's so stinking good. Let me ask you this. So we have coaches that come into our community all the time that have, we'll use your world as an example, that are in the gym all the time, right? They work out, they've got great success. We had someone come into the community here recently who owned 16 McDonald's franchises and had just exited them and was going to step into the space to coach families who own businesses or restaurants together, right? Though they come in, and I see this all the time, and they have the imposter syndrome, right? The imposter syndrome that says, can I do this? Why would someone pay me to do something that maybe they're better at it than I am? And these imposter syndromes, and they paralyze these people from actually taking action. So let's talk about that just for a quick minute. What's Drew's thoughts around imposter syndrome?
I think the first thing is realizing that everybody has insecurities. Everybody has doubts. The thing that we always talk about is build evidence, build proof. And, the first thing I always do is I always look, is there one person that has done exactly what you want to do? If there's one person, then that should give you proof that it can be done. And then what you have to do is you have to understand you're not trying to be who they are now. You got to rewind back the clock and say, what was the first step they took? What was the first thing they did? What were some of the setbacks they had? And realize, wow, I'm right where they were at some point in their journey, because everyone starts off as a beginner and then they become an expert over time. And believe it or not, the majority of my work with NBA players is during the season is mental. It's confidence. It's even these all-stars constantly have this feeling of I'm not good enough. I'm not great enough. I'm, whatever. And that's part of the process. And so that's what we do is we always talk about build evidence, and it's, there's a ton of stories. There's one really cool story in the book about a player named Tyrese Halliburton. He was an all-star starter last season. He won a gold medal on the Olympic team this summer.
Pacers, let's go.
Pacers, right? So 2 years ago, literally less than 2 years ago, he was on the Sacramento Kings averaging 12 points a game.
Right.
And his agent said, hey, he's got a contract coming up. And, we think that right now, based on his production, he'll probably sign a 4-year, $80 million deal, which is still great. I know the numbers seem crazy because people are going, wait a second, there's a problem with that. We think that if he works with you, he's really going to be able to be, a higher value player. And so he's like, is there any way I could introduce you guys? And so we went to dinner and I pulled out the computer and I went through all these analytics, all these numbers, all these film. And I basically was just showing him, you're not aggressive enough. You're not wired to be a scorer, and you need to be. And this is why. It actually benefits your team's win percentage. It actually benefits you. It's going to help you get these accolades. It's going to help you make more money. And so I painted this picture of why it matters that he changes, because you need to know why it matters for you. Because if you don't think it's going to necessarily change your life, there's no reason to put in all this energy and effort to make changes, because we're wired as humans to stay comfortable instead of doing these things that feel like risk at first. And so I told Tyrese, I said, listen, if you want to prove to me that you have what it takes to work with me, tomorrow night against the Philadelphia 76ers, you got to shoot 14 shots. At the time, he was averaging I think 10 or 11 shots. And he was like, 14. And I go, if you shoot 13, I'm not working with you. I'm not taking you on as a client. I need you to see if you can tap into something that allows you to be a little more aggressive. The next night, he was 11 for 19, career high 38 points.
Wow.
He had never scored over 28 points in a game. The reason I tell that story is because Tyrese thought he needed me to teach him new skills. He was like, I need a whole summer with you to build these skills. And I was like, no, you need a new mentality. The next night, we had never touched a basketball together. All we did was had a conversation together. We rewired his mentality. And then sure enough, the next season, that summer we worked out. The next season, he was an NBA All-Star for the first time in his career. He went on to sign a $260 million deal. So literally after 1 year together, he went from $80 million to $260 million, went from a 12-point-a-game scorer to a guy that was over 20 points a game. And people are like, wow, Drew, you magically inserted all these skills into his game. And I'm like, the biggest thing was mentality. And so going back to the conversation you talked about, I think more people try to add all these new resources and get all these new tools. Like I have a thing that I say, my book is called Stop Bullshitting Yourself. And so one of the things I say is, what are the types of bullshit? And one of the things I have is a tool collector, somebody that's constantly getting new tools and thinks they need new shiny tools instead of using the tools. And I'm going, I think that's what I would tell people is, listen, you have what it takes. You just got to tap into something that you never tapped into it in your heart and in your head, because that's what really is going to take you to the levels that you've never been before.
That's so good. This everybody who's listening right now, I want you to just stop the podcast, start it all over, and start listening again and start taking more notes, because we're not even finished with this podcast, and this is incredible. So, what's really neat about the rewiring of the brain is, and I say this to any of my clients that I'm working with. I was just doing a keynote here recently, and it's very similar language. I'm not going to teach you anything new, but I'm definitely going to teach you a different way to think.
Yeah, I think that's all that matters.
It's all that matters, yeah. So let me ask this from your perspective, right? So you're at the top of your game in that trainer space, in that space of working with these world-class athletes. Where did Drew get his continual push, drive, coaching? Who coaches Drew, right? Who do you lean into that you get to then continue to have hold you accountable and rewire your brain? What's that look like from your vantage point?
Very similar to what I told you earlier when you asked, who was pushing me and motivating me. To be honest with you, my biggest fear is letting people that trust me down.
Sure.
And that's what drives everything. I'm a results-driven person that I'm looking. If my clients are getting results, I want them to keep getting better results, but I'm like, okay, we're doing a good job. If there's any slumps that are occurring, any struggles that are occurring, any stresses that are occurring, I look at that as my job to find solutions for those problems. And so, I've had a lot of great teachers. My high school coach was a great teacher. A really good story from my high school coach. My freshman year, I entered as a really talented offensive player. I was a great shooter, had unbelievable ball skills, and it didn't matter. Every time I made a mistake on defense, he subbed me out. In practice, if we played make it, take it, which for those of you who don't know, it means like if you score, you get to stay on offense. I never got to be on offense. If I got to stop when normally my teammates would get to rotate on offense, I would stay on defense. I was all-time defense to the point where I was like, I'm ready to transfer. Like every area coach was recruiting me. They were telling me, come over here. Your coach is screwing you over. And my mom was like, listen, you don't get better running from things. You get better going through things. And I stuck with it. And my junior going into senior year, I was playing in the biggest Nike event that you can possibly play in, the Nike Peach Jam. And I got matched up with a point guard named Kendall Marshall, who was the number one point guard in the country. He ended up going to North Carolina, played in the NBA. And I held him to 1 for 11 shooting, which meant he made one shot, he missed 10 for non-basketball folks. And after the game, I got 12 Division I scholarships, including Belmont, where I ended up playing. And I only had 8 points that game. I was 2 for 3 from the field. I only shot 3 shots. Made 2 threes, made 2 free throws, but my defense was what got me those scholarships. And I remember thinking back to my freshman year, and I go, man, if I would have transferred, if I would have ran from that problem instead of gone through that problem, I would have never grown into the defender that would have been good enough to hold him for 1 for 11 shooting and to get those college scholarships. And that's when I really realized great coaches force you to do what you need to do instead of allow you to do what you want to do. And so I would say I have a ton of life lessons that motivate me. I have a ton of people in my corner that motivate me. But the biggest thing is I always snap back to my little, 8-year-old self that was, begging for one ticket to an NBA game. Now I get paid to go to NBA games, Back then, I would do anything to even just be close enough to see an NBA MVP. Now I'm telling NBA MVPs they're not good enough and there's another level. So I always try to just keep everything in perspective. And, my grandma had a great quote that I think will help a lot of people. It's my favorite quote. It's a quote that I live by. When I first started getting some money, a little bit of notoriety, she said, Drew, just remember this one thing. I said, all right, whatever it is, Grandma. Grandma's advice is always the best advice. She said, you're never going to have everything that you want, but you're always going to have more than you need. My grandma, believe it or not, worked with Mother Teresa. She did some amazing things in her world, but she had this perspective that most people can't tap into, where you really appreciate your blessings instead of, counting your burdens. And I've always used that as my motivator. And so I don't really have a coach that I'm calling on and saying, hey, coach, I need a pick me up. I just wake up getting after it. I go to sleep, getting after it. I don't have an off switch. As you can kind of tell, my girlfriend gives me trouble because there's times at 3 a.m. I'll wake up and I'll have a great idea and I'll start pounding away. And she's like, can't it wait till the morning? I'm like, I won't be able to sleep because my brain just doesn't stop. But I do think it's just because I really do appreciate all the blessings that, that we have. And I really do think that there are people out there in the world that pray for our worst days. They pray for the things that we take for granted. They pray for the things that we look at sometimes as inconvenience. God, I gotta go get groceries. You have food. That is amazing. You have enough money to buy groceries. That's amazing. Oh, my house is hot. The air conditioner's not broke. Well, you have a house? Wow, that's amazing. Oh, my shoes are dirty. You have shoes. Wow, that's amazing. So I try to keep that perspective. And I think that's what really coaches me is that, life is very, very short. And, we all are born with nothing. We're going to die with nothing. So we should just appreciate every experience that we have while we have the chance to do it.
That's so good. So last question here. Let's talk about John Maxwell's a dear friend and a mentor and coach of mine. And he likes to use the word legacy. And he said, but you can't have a legacy without legs. So as we look at Drew's legacy you've probably got another 20, 30, 40, 50 years in the space that you're in, as long as you choose to be in it. What do you want your legacy to be? Let's just say remove the NBA or keep the NBA in there, though. From your own perspective, what do you want Drew's legacy to be?
It's very simple. I want to help as many people as possible find inner peace. And what I realized is when I first started training, I was just helping players on the court. And then when I really helped them start winning was when I helped them on and off the court. There was a moment when I was younger and, I write a whole chapter on this in my book, but to not spoil it, it's basically we get out of a customized Ferrari that was a couple $100,000 and we're walking up into a penthouse that was probably $25,000, $30,000 a month rent. And I remember we get to the door and I remember this NBA All-Star looked at me and was like, man, life isn't fair. And I joked around and I snapped back. I was like, yeah, life isn't fair. We just drove a Ferrari. We're going into a penthouse. You're an NBA All-Star. You're hooking up with the supermodels all over the world. And he's like, listen, I would trade all of that to feel great. And that's when I realized you can have millions of dollars and you can have millions of fans and not be a fan of yourself. That's when I realized that, that money does not solve the internal problems. It can solve a lot of external problems and it can definitely improve your life. But it's the games that I call the deep games, the games that we play in our head and our heart, that we don't even know we're playing, those are the ones that I'm trying to try to really impact. I want people to feel great when they wake up. I want people to feel great when they go to sleep. I want people to shrink the gap between, where they are and where they want to be. And I really want to help give people the confidence they need to be able to pursue the things that they know that are capable of if they tap into something they've never tapped into. And so that's what my legacy is. I don't want it to be Drew. My clients have made $5 billion worth of contracts on the court. And when people say that, I'm like, that doesn't matter to me. What matters to me is the lives that have changed. There's been multiple clients of mine that have been depressed, clinically depressed, that are now enjoying unbelievable happiness off the court. And I'm like, those are my biggest wins, and, the trophies that they win, they sit on a mantle, they get dust on them. No one cares about those. It's the feeling that you have inside of you. So that's what I want to do. I told somebody the other day, somebody's like, Drew, you're hustling so hard. You're going to be on the bestseller list. Your book comes out in a month. And when I said, I don't care, I said, 9 months from now, when I start getting emails from people that say, Drew, my weight changed, my finances changed, my relationship with my kids changed, my marriage improved, whatever, their life changed and life improved using the strategies outlined in the book, that's when I'm going to be like, it was all worth it. It was all worth it. And so that's what I would tell everybody. I mean, to be honest with you, my one, like somebody asked me the other day, like, what's a quote that you would leave people with? It'll all be worth it. It'll all be worth it. And just know that, if all the decisions and actions that you've made in your life have got you to this point that you're at right now, just know that all the things you're doing now are going to get you to wherever you're going to get to. And so, the question I always ask people is like, if you keep doing the exact same thing you're doing, what will your life look like in 5 years from now, in 10 years from now, in 20 years from now on your deathbed? And then if you change and make these little things that you should be doing, if you started eating well, sleeping well, eliminating toxic thoughts, eliminating toxic people, started taking care of your finances, starting to take care of your health, like, then what would your life look like? And compare those two. And when you start comparing, it's one of those things where you don't want to get to the point of the end of your life. And, I believe in heaven. So you don't want to get to heaven and somebody hands you an iPad and say, hey, watch what your life could have been.
Right.
You don't want to start crying and say, damn, I could have been all these things that I wanted. So that's what I would say my legacy is going to be, is helping a lot of people find inner peace, which ultimately drives external success as well. I think those things go hand in hand, but winning on and off the court, winning on and off the business, winning on and off, the relationship, just winning in life to me is all about inner peace.
Well, I can definitely tell you this, and I've been taught this, and I'm sure you have too, is when you meet someone, when you finish that conversation or when you leave that person, you want them to leave feeling better. You want them to leave feeling better about themselves or feeling better about their situation. I can tell you right now, my friend, I know me leaving this podcast, I feel a whole lot better now having not only met you, but learned from you in the time that we've had here. And I have no doubt that listeners are also the same way. So that legacy that you speak of, I mean, it's already starting. I mean, just from this simple little podcast, you are making a difference in people's lives. And it's you have proof, you have receipts, right? So let's talk about the book here real quick. Let's finish with this book. How do they get the book? When is it released? What can they do? And just tell them everything they need to know about your book. Let's make this a #1 bestseller.
Excited about it. Yeah. So it's funny because the title is Stop Bullshitting Yourself. And my publishers, my editors, they all were like, take out the cuss word. And I said, no, because I really do believe the secret in getting whatever you want is to stop bullshitting yourself. And it basically, the book identifies the things that, why you are at where you are in your life. It identifies why you've allowed those gaps to remain. It identifies, what you need to do to eliminate the things that have held you back and added weight to you and dragged you forward so that you can finally move forward. Then you literally fill out in the book. It's like a workbook as you go, which I really like because I've always read books and I'm like, okay, those are good, but I want to leave with a blueprint. So during this, you actually fill out, like I'm going through it right now. You're actually filling out stuff, as you go and you're putting in. So when you leave the book, you have a blueprint. You know exactly what you're going to do. You know the exact steps to take. And there's a lot of cool NBA untold stories. There's a lot of stories like my dad, but others, everyday people that have completely altered their finances, their relationships, their health, etc., using the strategies and principles in the book. So yeah, drewhanlen.com. stopbullshittingyourself.com. They all redirect to the same place, but February 11th is when it releases. I've got some cool book bundles too, a 33-minute masterclass for everyone that pre-orders the book. If they're players or coaches, they get free training programs. And then I'm actually starting next week a series with NBA athletes where we talk about kind of those insecurities and moments of doubt. And, it's from NBA MVPs to, leading scorers, the guys that have won championships and gold medals, and they get access to that as well. So I'm super excited. Like I said, I mean, this is when I started writing the book, I wrote it to get I wanted to help a couple people out. I had told all these stories to people and they said, you got to write a book. But as I've, trimmed the fat and made this thing as tight as possible, I'm really proud of the finished product. And everybody that I've given a copy to so far has applied the stuff, which is all that matters, because I think there's a lot of books that are really good, but you leave and you say that was a really good book and you're entertained. This is a book that I think that people will constantly go back to and say, this is the system for everything. I don't need another system. This is the system I need. These are the strategies I need to finally take action and finally do all the things that I've been saying I'm going to do for too long.
So good. Well, I want to make a commitment to you. I want to buy, I don't know how big they call them in cases, a few cases of these books. And then all the listeners right now, go to my Instagram, Adam Roach, and I want you to DM me the two words, stop bullshitting. Anybody that DMs me the word stop bullshitting, I'm going to send you Drew's book. So I'm going to buy the books from Drew, and then you go to the Instagram and say, stop bullshitting. As soon as you do that, I'll get your address and I'll shoot you Drew's book.
I love that. No, I appreciate that. And like I said, it's one of those things where I think that the one thing that I've learned about you is you love pouring into your community. You know what I mean? A lot of times people that do podcasts or shows, they're doing it so that they can ultimately get to a certain level of status. And for you, you've done so many great things. You've exited businesses. You're doing this to pour into others. And so, we share that love for people. And I really think that everyone that's listening, your audience, should realize that you're doing this selflessly instead of selfishly. And I love that you pour into your community, and I love that you're constantly trying to give back and help people improve their lives, which is what we all should be doing together.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep, that's our vision statement, to empower coaches to change and serve 100 million people using our real coaching blueprint. So this is, we're in alignment. This is really, really good. Well, Drew, I appreciate you. I respect you. I have a lot of gratitude for the value that you bring to this planet and the people that you're serving. And just to have you on the I Love Coaching podcast, man, this has been a true blessing for not only myself, for our listeners, and all the people that will follow my direction and go get your book, right? That's what we're going to do. So I really appreciate you. And I know how busy you are. So thank you for taking the time out of your busy day and your busy schedule to come and speak to us and serve us. Thank you.
Awesome. Appreciate you having me on. Enjoyed it.
All right, everybody. So go subscribe to our podcast, go rate this podcast, and you know what you're going to have to do? I know you're going to download this podcast so you can listen to it over and over again. And go follow Drew. Go check him out. Go to my Instagram. Stop bullshitting. Give me that DM, and I'll send you his book. Thanks, everybody. Take care. See you. Bye.